from construction materials. Organizations like Rebuilding Exchange are climate visionaries. In the U.S., the wood, concrete, steel, and glass that make up our built environments bring with them embodied carbon emissions. Such emissions occur upstream of the construction project, when we mine, when we manufacture, and when we move materials. In fact, the manufacture of construction materials accounts for 11% of annual greenhouse gas emissions. So Rebuilding Exchange is not only ahead of its time by being a leader in sustainable reuse of construction materials, but they also interrupt our outdated take, make, use, discard economy. Their salvage of valuable building materials spares our overtaxed landfills more than 1,500 tons of material each year. Thus, they're also community leaders in the movement toward a circular economy, or what they call, and I quote, the full circle solution, where whole homes and buildings are no longer single use. To talk more about this program, I'm pleased to welcome my colleague, Jenny Romer, who is EPA's Deputy Assistant Administrator for Pollution Prevention in our Office of Chemical Safety and Pollution Prevention. Jenny brings to this role her own expertise in circular economies. She authored the clever book called Can I Recycle This? A Guide to Better Recycling and How to Reduce Single-Use Plastics, which was published in 2021. At EPA, she oversees some of our most widely recognized national programs, including one called the Safer Choice Program. Jenny, I'm so pleased to welcome you to Evanston, and I turn it over to you. Oops.
Thank you so much to Regional Administrator Shore for that lovely introduction and for inviting me here today. I'm so excited to be here celebrating EPA's first grants funded by the Inflation Reduction Act to support cleaner construction materials. And it's great to celebrate these grants here in Evanston at Rebuilding Exchange, an organization that is reusing building materials, reducing construction waste, and training workers. We have many of the workers here today. So thank you to Rebuilding Exchange for hosting us today and for all that you do in Chicagoland. I am EPA's first Deputy Assistant Administrator for Pollution Prevention. And I brought, as Regional Administrator Shore mentioned, I brought to that position a passion for reuse that I really carried throughout my career. And I like to talk about recycling too. I even wrote a book about it. But it's even better to reuse materials than to recycle them, which is why I'm so pleased to be here today with Rebuilding Exchange, who are really experts on reuse in this sector. So, like Rebuilding Exchange, the Biden-Harris administration is committed to sustainable construction. We're creating a clean energy economy that benefits Americans with lower costs for families, good paying jobs for workers, and healthier air and cleaner water for communities. And as the United States government, we've set a goal of reducing U.S. greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2030 and achieving a net zero emissions economy by 2050. To achieve these goals, we'll need to reduce carbon emissions from our infrastructure sector. The production of construction materials used in buildings and infrastructure accounts for 15% of greenhouse gas emissions. That's a slightly updated number. We're really looking at all of the construction sector greenhouse gases at that phase. 15%. That's very significant. but it's good news that American companies and organizations like Rebuilding Exchange are leading the world in using construction materials with lower embodied carbon. So last month, the EPA announced that we're using funds from President Biden's Investing in America agenda to accelerate that progress. We have selected 38 recipients from across the country to receive approximately $160 million from the Inflation Reduction Act, the largest climate investment in history. So as part of that funding, the Rebuilding Exchange was selected to receive nearly $4 million. So congratulations. I think the dogs behind me are very excited about it too. So with these grants, the Rebuilding Exchange and 37 other recipients will report and reduce climate pollution from construction materials and products. EPA is helping businesses to measure, track, and report the carbon emissions and other impacts linked to the production, use, and disposal of construction materials and products through environmental product declarations, or what we like to call EPDs. See a couple people shaking their heads here about EPDs. So EPDs disclose the critical environmental impacts across the life cycle of a product with full transparency. So when you buy food, you can look at the nutrition facts and know what's in it and whether it's good for your body. And similarly, by looking at an EPD for a construction material or product, we can know about the environmental impacts of the construction material or product. So often one of the most important of these environmental impacts is the greenhouse gas emissions linked to the product. So today, also at EPA, we are releasing our implementation plan for a whole new EPA label for embodied carbon in construction materials. So that might not be as exciting for everyone here as the $4 million check, nearly $4 million check that we're going to hand out, but it's really a huge step in implementation for our program as well. So that new label will help purchasers find and therefore purchase cleaner construction materials. And the Biden-Harris administration's Buy Clean initiative leverages the purchasing power of the federal government, the largest purchaser in the world, to accelerate demand for clean construction materials used in those federal projects. So that label will provide clear definitions and confidence to purchasers who want to buy low carbon materials and know what they're buying is actually low or actually climate friendly construction materials. So we already know that salvaged materials are climate friendly materials. The work that Rebuilding Exchange does of salvaging materials for reuse is a critical strategy for lowering greenhouse gas emissions and transitioning to a more circular economy. However, there are no EPDs, no environmental product declarations for salvaged materials in the US currently. A handful of salvaged material EPDs exist in Europe, but with the overall grant funding, this will fundamentally change the situation in the US. With more than 1/4 of the projects selected, they have a salvage or reuse component. That's a big deal. So under Rebuilding Exchange grants, they will develop 25 EPDs, and they're sure to be a game changer. This may be obvious, but the great thing about salvaged materials for climate is that they largely avoid production emissions associated with new materials because they're already made. Think about a brick, for example. To make a brick, you need to mine clay and fire it in a kiln. That likely results in greenhouse gas emissions, but a salvaged brick doesn't require any of that. The same is true for a salvage plumbing fixture. All of the work to make it is already done, and it likely has many useful years left. And that's just a single fixture. So when you take a house and deconstruct it, salvaging useful materials for reuse, that's a more climate-friendly way than just demolishing that. But we'll be able to measure those benefits. You can't take credit for what you can't measure. So robust environmental product declarations from these salvaged construction materials will really shine a bright light on how low their associated greenhouse gas emissions are. Then we'll see even more reuse from these Buy Clean projects, as well as from companies that have made climate commitments, who are looking for a way to reduce their emissions, who might not have thought about salvage and reuse before. So this means fewer emissions from construction materials, and as a double win, it also creates more jobs. Part of the grant for Rebuilding Exchange also includes workforce training on embodied emissions and data collection analysis. So, Rebuilding Exchange has been doing this work for more than a decade, but the Inflation Reduction Act, with that, we're supercharging this and other efforts to promote cleaner, greener construction materials so we can continue to grow the clean energy economy for the future. And Rebuilding Exchange is really helping make that future a reality. So we're excited to work together. Thanks so much for having me here today. And I'll hand it back to Regional Administrator Shore. And Bailey.
Wow, that is so exciting. Thank you, Jenny. And now I'm going to introduce and I'm pleased to welcome Ina Gutierrez, the Executive Director of Rebuilding Exchange and a published author in her own right. In 2014, she published Walking the Walk, a guide to enfolding values into the organization and structure of small nonprofits. Under her leadership, Rebuilding Exchange has quadrupled its budget, and she told me that they're expanding their size. And with it, its mission to reuse building materials, reduce construction waste, and train tomorrow's building trades workers, some of whom I see have joined us today, and that's just terrific. Ina, over to you.
Thank you for joining us today. This is an exciting time for Chicagoland and for everyone here at Rebuilding Exchange. Rebuilding Exchange is a nonprofit social enterprise dedicated to reusing building materials, reducing construction waste, and training, supporting, and connecting people to seeking careers in the building trades. Through our 2 reuse retail stores in Evanston and Chicago, we divert building materials from landfills, while our deconstruction services provide environmentally friendly demolition to homeowners who want to save their building materials from waste. We empower community members through workshops and classes focused on repairing and repurposing building materials. Finally, our paid workforce training programs are designed to increase access to building trades careers, particularly for women and people of color. This is our first ever federal award. Initially, when we came across this funding opportunity, we hesitated. As you can see, we're a small, scrappy nonprofit. Our staff work hand in hand with customers, volunteers, donors, and program participants in community every day to accomplish our mission. So why did we decide to take on a project that might seem better suited for an academic setting, to prove that salvaged construction materials are better for the environment? By the way, we already know that's true. But then we asked the more relevant question, if not us, then who? And if not now, then when? This investment from the EPA will enable us to collect critical data from our 2 reuse stores and deconstruction services to demonstrate the reduced embodied greenhouse gas emissions in salvaged building materials. Over the next 5 years, we aim to create 25 environmental product declarations, train 150 individuals through our workforce training programs, and share our findings widely across the nation. Our hope is that this project will spark a greater demand for salvaged building materials, encouraging more individuals, governments, and institutional buyers to make environmentally friendly purchasing decisions. More salvaged building materials being purchased means more materials being saved from landfills and being put back into reuse. More clean construction materials being reused translates to reduced greenhouse gas emissions. And more reusable materials being purchased and used locally results in job creation and more employers hiring. Through our training programs, we are building a strong pipeline of qualified, skilled workers and will further infuse environmental literacy into our curriculum to meet employers' needs. But the most transformative aspect of this initiative is the potential to create a thriving and sustainable circular economy. Could we create a community with a strong distribution system where reuse is the norm and environmental impacts grow in tandem with living wage employment? I think we can. We are deeply grateful for the work that went into the Inflation Reduction Act, which makes programs like this possible. We are also thankful to the EPA for this recognition, and we're excited to do our part. Thank you.
Thank you, Ana. Now I'm pleased to introduce Illinois' senior senator, Dick Durbin. I'm thrilled that he's able to join us today. As many of you know, he is a leader on environmental issues. He has consistently supported legislation to address climate change, knowing that we cannot have a healthy economy without a healthy ecology, and that good, well-paying green jobs are the key to that economy. Senator, thank you for being such a steadfast supporter for our agency's work. I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Deborah. I want to thank those in our audience for joining us today and their dogs for being here. A famous political philosopher named Bob Dylan once said, "You don't have to be a weatherman to know which way the wind's blowing." If your eyes are open and you're following the news and weather reports, you can see changes every single day in America. More fires, more flooding, more violent storms. Things are happening in a way that they never had before. It's a fair warning to all of us in our generation to do something, damn it, before it's too late. Greenhouse gas emissions may sound like some weird science theory. It's not. It's our everyday lives and our decision as individuals to do something about changing our lives. There are things we can do as homeowners, for example. I've slapped solar panels on my roof of my home, looking at energy heat pumps, looking at changing the way we heat water in our home, driving a hybrid car. The little things are the big things in this conversation. And that's why our gathering here today is so fundamental and basic. How many times have you walked past the building project and looked at that dumpster and thought, you know, some of that stuff still looks good. I thought it could be used. Well, thank God Rebuilding Exchange is taking a look at that too and changing it. Otherwise, all that stuff is going to end up in a landfill and create greenhouse gas emissions, which make this world a much more dangerous place to live. We owe it to you, and you owe it to your next generation to do your part now. The little things are the big things. To be one of the 40 recipients nationwide says a lot about Rebuilding Exchange. And I can't help but be impressed again as I've seen your Chicago operation and how orderly and clean this operation is. It really is impressive. It says a lot about people who care and want to do the right thing. So that's my speech, and that's all I've got to say. And now I want to turn to my friend, my leader from the city of Evanston, Jan Schakowsky.
Thank you to everyone. I have to give a special shout out to my dear friend Deb Shore, who is doing such a great job in the region 5, and also welcome our representative from Washington D.C. coming all the way here for such an important announcement. And I want to thank Ina and the Evanston, what do we call it, exchange? Rebuilding Exchange, for the incredible work that you've done for a very long time. And this is new progress that we're going to make. And doesn't it make sense, instead of throwing things away, to reuse them? I mean, it's a simple idea. And it's so incredibly important, especially for our environment. When we are able to see that all of these items can be resalvaged and reused, and we don't have to cut up something else in order to accomplish our goal. And of course, our main goal, as as we heard from Senator Durbin, and everyone that is here today cares so much about protecting our environment. And time is running out. We are seeing everywhere around the country the flooding, all kinds of events that are happening now. Look at what's happening in Florida and around that area. It's scary, and it's not something that we can't address. But I also just wanted to comment on these shirted workers that are here. Stand up for a second and let's clap the people. All these people who are going to play an important role, and thank you, Ina. You may be seated. To make sure that we are training people to make sure that we can do more to protect our environment. And I just wanted to emphasize the worker piece of this that I think is so incredibly important. We're going to need more and more people around the country who are going to help make our environment cleaner and safer. So to all who are involved in this multi-billion-dollar project, I'm so happy to be part of it. It's good for Evanston, it's good for the United States, it's good for the environment, and good for the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Congresswoman Schakowsky. Next, I'd like to introduce Evanston Mayor Daniel Biss. Daniel's public service has consistently featured cutting-edge initiatives to advance social, racial, and economic justice. Under his leadership as mayor, Evanston has distributed the first municipal reparations to Black residents, established a guaranteed income pilot, and advanced political reforms, including ranked choice voting. Daniel is a longtime friend of mine, and I'm pleased to welcome him today.
Good morning. First of all, before we start, Ina, do you know if the dogs bark when they're happy or unhappy?
Oh.
Okay, I'm just trying to get some understanding of the feedback. Deborah, thank you for the kind introduction. It is just a delight to see the work that you're doing now in this role after, as you say, many years of a wonderful friendship. We're so lucky to have you in the neighborhood here and in this important position in the federal government. I'm here to say thank you to the Biden-Harris administration for this important investment. Thank you to Senator Durbin, to my Congresswoman and our neighbor and friend, Congresswoman Schakowsky, for making this possible. I really appreciate the urgency that both of you bring to the conversation about climate change. The fear, honestly, yes, it is scary what we see, but also let us not forget, we can take the needed action. And the Historic Inflation Reduction Act is an illustration of the power that we have as a country when we choose to come together and take these issues with the seriousness they deserve necessary. This grant is going to an organization that I adore. I'm a customer, first of all, but Ina is not only a friend, but the Rebuilding Exchange is an extraordinary partner for the city of Evanston. And I want to start with our shirted workers sitting in the second, third, and fourth row. We don't have a better partner than the Rebuilding Exchange when it comes to workforce development. Ina told me that of this cohort of workers, we have 10 Evanston Township High School graduates. that's transformational in this community. That's transformational as a different kind of opportunity for important, meaningful, dignified middle-class work that frankly we didn't pay enough attention to in much of this city's history. And that was a mistake. And we're fixing it because of the leadership of organizations like the Rebuilding Exchange. And finally, the mission of this organization is so important. As was just said, it's so logical, it's so sensible, it's so wasteful not to act in this way. The Rebuilding Exchange teaches us at the city, by the way, how to transform our operations to be more mindful of the substances that we should be reusing rather than discarding, of the techniques that we need to use in order to make that possible. And I want to close, and I'm sorry if this comes off as a little hippie-ish, but I think that a circular economy is not only pivotal for sustainability, which it clearly is. It's not only valuable for workforce development and economic justice, which it obviously is, but it also brings us together. It connects people and communities by virtue of the fact that we see each other as joined by the items and the objects and the materials that we share with one another. And I'm sorry, but I think we are living in a time where there is a crisis of connection. And every act that we take as a society to bring ourselves closer together and knit those social bonds more closely is meaningful and important and valuable. So thank you to our federal partners for making this possible. Thank you to the Rebuilding Exchange for your visionary leadership and your work to educate us about how we can be better. Thank you to the EPA, and congratulations.
Thank you, Daniel. And thanks to all our speakers for joining us today. And I congratulate those of you in the workforce development program. I used to say, if you want to do something where there are going to be guaranteed jobs, do something with water. And I still believe that. But now I'm going to add, do something with salvage. Because there are going to be guaranteed jobs, and they are so important. So I salute you. Thank you for joining us today. And now we'd be happy to answer any questions if you may have them. If we don't have any questions, I think we have a picture to take.
Picture of
I will say that this giant check is made from salvage materials. Bought from Rebuilding Exchange. Very, very important to this.
Isn't it great?
I think I'll give it to the receiving. Sure. Is there anyone else that you want?
Need us to back up?
Down front.
A
That's
little
it,
closer,
please.
like we know each other. Look okay?
Where should we look?
I know.
Right here, real quick. 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. And then.
What do we think is going to catch us?
Thank you.
Now, the one that's a symbol, it will be put to good use.
1, 2, 3. Thank you. And now it's for sales. Yeah, so come up for your finish up, folks. Come on up.
Let's do one way, but let's get a variety.
Let's get some meetings over on the side too.
Hi, trainees. If you signed the photo consent form, or if you did not sign it, please step out.
Yeah, you have to have signed the consent form.
If you did not sign it,
Yep. Come closer. You gotta make rows. Try to get behind the check as much as you can. Thank you. How are you looking? Zach?
If we can squeeze in a teeny bit more.
Squeeze in.
Like the sun around.
Scrappy, did I mention
This
her?
is like over here for the round table.